I was looking at your Instagram where you're like, I'm feeling overexposed. And I was like, is this part of
No, actually, no. No, that was a whole other thing. It was just a day of uh, overexposure.
Yeah. I think that, like there is something to be said about over vulnerability where you're like, I think we're so in our heads as well over like, did I say too much? Did I, ruin anything?
Yeah.
Cindy Robinson is back on Reinvention Room.
Woohoo!
Cindy, you're back.
It's been so long.
I know it has been
Sorry
too
about
long.
that.
That's okay. It's so funny because I would text you here and again like, hey, anytime you want, the door is open, and you're like, nope, I'm in the hole. And you were in the hole because of why? Not a hole. I would say you were internal.
No, it was like a rabbit hole of
Right.
some sorts. A lot of it was that I was writing the Maladaptive Daydream.
So Maladaptive Daydreams is her second memoir in 2 years.
It is, yeah. It's still so vain to say that, but it's not from a vain place at all.
It never is. I think about even your arc, and your arc to me is so interesting because you've been on my podcast like 13 times. Like we've talked about raising teenagers. We've talked about children. We've talked about how I hate playing with my kids. We've talked about teens and screens. We've talked about neurodiversity. We've talked about late diagnosed ADHD and autism. And so I always love to ask you this question because every time I ask you this question, the answer is different. But tell me how you would describe yourself career-wise right now.
Career-wise, it has evolved, but currently I primarily describe myself as a neurodivergent life coach. And so that's supporting people with late diagnosis, with the unmasking process, primarily ADHD and autistic people, level 1 autism, high masking. Just kind of help people through that process, explaining the neurophysiology of how their brains work. So kind of helping give them the user manual of how they work.
Can you define high masking?
Yeah, that would mean it's very hard to tell from the outside their symptoms, but a lot of their symptoms are internalized or they're hidden or masked in order to, not have a spotlight on them, not have criticism sent their way, and they have the ability to hide that. Not everyone with ADHD and autism have the ability to mask their symptoms, but for some people they do. And they are usually late diagnosed for that reason. And so I work specifically with that population to kind of help walk them through that transition.
What's so interesting about you is that your first book, Bright Girl Lacks Focus, is on your unmasking, specifically around the ADHD. And it was it is still such a brilliantly written memoir. And as soon as you released it, you got diagnosed.
Yeah, with autism. Plot twist.
Tell us more.
So I spent all this time like cultivating this really thoughtful memoir on like the intersection of ADHD and trauma because I had always kind of defined my symptoms as either being trauma related or ADHD related. And so I felt like I had really packaged myself up really well with that book. And literally, after releasing it, I had just felt like so much growth, like I'd come so far. And then I was hitting these walls again of like, but why do I still struggle with this? Or why do I still struggle with that? And through that realization, I ended up pursuing a diagnosis. I actually thought I was getting diagnosed as gifted, not autistic.
The funniest stories.
And so, I found out I'm not gifted at all. Very average IQ, but am in fact autistic, level 1, high masking with low support needs. So this memoir was to kind of bring that into the fold because that was a piece of myself that I had not really honored or admitted was there.
I think what's interesting about your particular story is that in the first memoir, Bright Girl Lacks Focus, and even I've known you for probably 6 years now, and when I met you, you're a totally different person. I mean, you're the same person, but I feel like there was, if I'm going to use the term high masking, you were very deferential to everybody but you. Everybody was better. Everybody was, and you were very self-deprecating, where all of that is gone. Gone. Like it's gone. And when you meet people and you can kind of clock and almost stereotype, like, oh, this person falls in this box or this category. You've done a complete healing journey that has been like a 180 over this, and not good or bad, but I think it is the art of, I released I send out the weekly emails. If you need it, it's AllisonHair.com/email. But every Thursday I send out an email. And this week's email, I was talking about the state of perpetually becoming, which most memoirs kind of fall in this of like, I've arrived. You put that period at the end of the book and you're done. And then some shit hits the fan and you're like, what the fuck? And so it is like that mystery versus mastery. And I feel like your journey has been such an interesting reflection for all of us, neurodivergent or not, around unmasking and unlearning. And I'd be curious to see where you pictured yourself at the beginning of the memoir, Maladaptive Daydreams, and what you discovered about the unbecoming as you are becoming more Cindy.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to note that, I never want to give the impression that there's a complete arc. Like, I think I'm always going to be evolving, and I really extend, and I think with these both books, I extend an invitation for other people to also allow there to just be an ever evolution, and that you're never really done. And I don't think true liberation or true fulfillment of self really is going to happen until death. So I'm just going to keep on learning, keep on growing all the way until the end. I think that's worth noting because I had read memoirs and it would sometimes give the impression of like, wow, they started here and they wound up there, and it's just sort of yeah. And I've learned it's cyclical, and how my brain works in particular, it's that way. And so, long before you and I met, there was other Cindy's then, which I would all say they're all very much still alive and well in me.
Yeah.
But I've been evolving since birth, and I've been changing, and I've been needing to grow, and I think that's just sort of like a state of being that I need to stay in, is learning and growth. And so, yeah, these are capsules, time capsules of parts of that growth, but I do assume that I'm going to continue to evolve in all sorts of ways that I don't give myself permission to, and in all sorts of ways that feel really great and beautiful. But and when I started Maladaptive Daydreams, it really was like, I don't really know what I'm doing. I don't really know what I have to say. I just feel like there's things that need to be said. And then I just kept having an image of a feeling, honestly, that I wanted to create, like a little world I wanted to create for myself to go live in. And so
tell me more about this world.
Well, and Bright Girl Lacks Focus started like that too, like a vibe. And I would have a playlist of like, I want a world that like this music creates in my mind, but I want to be able to create it. And so it was just sort of a kind of whimsical place, but that would also be really safe to lay down in when things were really difficult. And so in creating Maladaptive Daydreams, it really was me creating that world that I could go back and revisit it whenever I needed to, and just kind of be comforted by it, cry by it, or feel whimsical and really empowered in my whimsy. But I did not know what that was going to look like at all. It was as weird as how I'm describing it. It was just like, oh, there's this feeling in me, and I need to put this feeling into words so that I can go and live there, and hopefully other people would want to join me too.
But speaking of words, like you did this with half poetry, half storytelling. And when I asked you, why poetry? I didn't even realize that was a thing. And you're like, I don't know. Tell me why poetry.
Yeah, that part sucked because
Why?
Well, it was like, I had done Bright Girl Lacks Focus, right? I had done, and which is vignettes. It's
very
storytelling.
Funny. You're funny throughout all.
Well, thank you.
You're a funny chick.
Thank you. That's my survival mechanism. It's humor. And if I didn't have it, I would be dead. But I felt like, okay, I know how to do this. I know how to write a memoir because I did Bright Girl X Focus. It's a series of stories told in a certain order. It's all it is. And it resonated with people, which was cool. So I thought, you know how to do this. Do it again. This time with autism, right? Like this rebranded, but like same
This is
thing.
like when you let all the weird out.
Yeah, it was like, but it was like, this should just be the same formula because you did this before. But of course, it was not that simple. And I couldn't think of a way to create the world in stories. And so it kept coming out as poetry. So I was like,
Wow.
okay, I'll write poems that will be placeholders.
Do you normally write poems?
No, never done poetry. I mean, I've written it for fun or like for somebody's birthday or something. And I did write poems as a child that I'm sure were terrible, but no, this was the first real
Wow.
attempt at poetry. And yeah, they were supposed to just be placeholders for a feeling that I was like, I'll figure out the story to tell. I'll figure out how to put this in a normal context later. And then I couldn't, and there was just no other way to do it. But, there are stories in it as a thread. There's a linear story, but it's a lot of poetry.
There is like a creative freedom that this book allows for you. And I'm thinking about, first of all, I'll give you a funny story, and this will be so on brand with how obnoxious I am. But I remember when I was in my early 30s and I was on the dating sites, I was single, and they would say like favorite books. And I would always put books. I don't read books. I want to have a big life and somebody will write a book about me.
Wow. Showstopper.
Nothing's changed. Anyway, I think the concept of a memoir, of writing, and I work with a lot of personal brands, like people that are in service-based businesses, or they are executives, or they are business leaders, but they are on a mission. They're on a mission to help. And a lot of times that looks like authors, speakers, coaches, consultants. And a lot of those people really struggle with the thought of like writing a memoir. Is my story good enough, big enough? Do I have time? And I know that you have hosted workshops specifically for neurodivergent people to write their memoirs. Tell me about what you learned about, even if it was the tension of like, should I be writing this? Should I not be writing this? And finding the time. I'd love to understand your experience.
Yeah, and I think that's useful, like to share, because I didn't understand that or see that, and I felt like I had to figure that out for myself. So I do feel like that's helpful information to share with people.
Which part is helpful?
How do you come about writing a memoir, like the process of
Yeah.
writing it, and what does it do for you, and stuff like that, and inviting people to maybe give themselves a green light to that. Because definitely the number one thing that stops people from expressing themselves in that way is, who am I, right? Imposter syndrome,
Yeah.
all of that, which I totally get. And I for sure should be I roll at myself writing a memoir the entire time I was writing it. It was just like, oh, please, like, what are you doing? But what I learned in the process of writing it is it really helped me make sense of my story. Helped me make sense of myself and realize, wow, I'm not so crazy after all. It totally makes sense how I ended up in this situation or in that situation, to put it in this linear context, or to really try and unpack it in that way. So when, if people are considering that, but they kind of feel like, oh, I need to have achieved something or done something great in order to write a memoir, I would really push back on that.
Really?
And yeah. I think there should be way more ordinary stories being told authentically. Because those are the memoirs that resonated with me.
Tell me more about that, because how do you know? I think people have a really bad time self-reflecting on self-awareness around, I think we feel, or at least I can speak for me, that I've always felt like I was special, but I don't feel like it shows up on the page. Do you know what I mean? Like, and does everyone feel like they're a unique snowflake, but nobody's got the message yet? The signal's broken. Right?
Yeah. I mean, I would argue that you shouldn't write a memoir because you think you're special. I think you should write a memoir because you're telling the truth about yourself, and you're self-reflective. And so, yeah, I can see how that hangs you up, because if you think memoirs should be written by special people, then maybe none of us should, because nobody's special.
Yeah.
I certainly didn't write mine because I thought I was so special. I really, really wrote both of them because of how unspecial I am. And I thought, but I can tell that story. I can't tell you how great I am. I can't sell you on what an awesome person I am, or,
That's certainly not your jam.
no, I'm not going to do it. And, but I can tell you the truth about myself. And then you can decide, does anything about that resonate with you? And I think that shifts then, because it's like the pressure is not on me to prove that I'm special, or to prove that my story is unique. That's crazy to me. We all are connected. And so we've all experienced all the emotions. My job was first to just write an honest story, and then then I decided to share that. And that's what resonated with people. I've had a surprise response to the book, and it hasn't been, wow, because your story's so unique, or because you're so special. It's been, oh my God, no one's ever talked about that experience that I also have before.
Yes.
Or I've never heard anybody like me tell that story before. So I think, yeah, you should, if you're thinking memoir writing is for being special, it kind of defeats the whole purpose.
That's so interesting. And I want to reflect something back to you. And I saw this, I don't know, maybe a couple of years ago, where you had acknowledged that you hum to like sounds of the air conditioning, like where you normally would hum if you heard that, because it would make you feel comfort. And it was such a tiny little moment that I recognized that I've done that too, but would have never put a spotlight on it. It's like those ordinary moments of like, I've been doing this thing where if I have a memory that pops into my head, and maybe it's like a memory out of nowhere, and it's a moment, it's like I'm in a different place, I invite myself to like stay in that memory and like feel what it felt like. And it could be completely innocuous, of just trying to almost acknowledge that this moment existed for me in the past, almost like an honoring of staying in a memory. And I wonder, from a memoir perspective, how do you find what lane or what path it's going to take? Like this Maladaptive Daydreams is clearly about your unmasking and your coming to terms with your diagnosis of autism, but then all the data, all of the points in your past that kind of supported, like, it's always been there. It's just been hiding, covered, masked. And now that the mask is off, what does it look like? And it becomes this creative freedom for you. But how do you guide people to kind of find, like, where would I even start?
Yeah, I would say typically it's like, what have you wrestled with the most? I mean, so finding the theme, because memoirs have a theme, right? It's not an autobiography. We're not telling you every detail of everything that ever happened to us. There usually is a theme of like, this is the journey, this is the specific journey I went on.
Wait, memoir versus autobiography.
Yeah.
I never even thought there might be a difference.
Yeah,
I need to cut you off.
Yeah, there is a difference. Yeah, autobiography is just like the retelling of somebody's entire life.
Okay.
And then memoir is usually a theme of like, oh, a road trip I did one time.
Yeah.
And it's the story of that, or this figuring out I had autism, and like how you're sharing that specific aspect.
Yeah.
So usually there's a focus. So with figuring out what someone's focus would be, it would usually be, what have you wrestled with the most? Whether that be childhood trauma, whether that be, just what has been profound in your life.
Yeah.
And so that's how you kind of find the theme. And then you need to tell it honestly. And like to the point of back to this, am I special? One thing I think I did that I think I'm proud of about both memoirs is I didn't try to be the hero of the story.
That was like number one for you.
Yes.
That you never want to be the hero in any story.
No, not at all. And that's because I needed to look at myself with discernment, and I needed to process my story objectively to know whether I could forgive myself for some things or appreciate myself for other things. And so that's something I really encourage when I'm working with people who are interested in writing a memoir or just making sense of their life, even if they're not doing it in that way. is don't be the hero. Let yourself even be the villain. Just tell the truth, whatever it is. Just kind of tell the truth of how it came to be, and then let everybody else decide. But you'll feel how you feel about yourself at the end of it. And then what everybody else takes away from that is really, that's their job, not yours.
So this begs the question around writing for an audience versus writing for you.
Yeah.
And so I hear a lot about, what's his name? The famous producer.
This is probably
Music
not
producer.
Rick Rubin.
Rick Rubin.
Yeah.
So Rick Rubin famously talks about, like, I don't write for anybody.
Yep.
Ever. Ever, 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 ever. But it's really hard not to picture your judgy mother-in-law on the other side going, she said what?
Yeah.
About my son? You know? It's really hard. Do you find yourself filtering a lens or editing it as you're doing it for the reader? Because you talked about, like, it was really frustrating to write poetry and I will put it in order later. And so you're like, let me just get it out. But I wonder how much we may stop ourselves from writing our story physically or, literally or figuratively. Yeah. But writing our story, editing, how's this going to come across? I don't want to come across as the hero. I don't want to come across as the expert. I don't want to come across with tying a pretty bow that everything is now perfect. But at the same time, you also want it to have a point.
Mm-hmm. And I would just replace come across with be, right? So instead of I don't want to come across as the villain, I don't want to be this. I don't want to be that. So am I telling the truth? Like, I don't want to be inauthentic. But what I really suggest, as far as what I did, and it seems to be helpful, is first tell the story for yourself. So as if no one's going to look at it, and just get it out. Like, just vomit it out, all the things you need to say, and don't worry about that anyone is ever going to see it. And then once the story is told, you can look back and say, okay, I maybe don't want to hurt this person's feelings. Like, maybe that story is theirs to tell.
Yeah.
Or, maybe this is redundant, whatever I've said. I felt that, because for me, I felt the need to purge, like, all my sins, particularly in Bright Girl Lacks Focus. It was just like a purge. And then when I was reading over it, I was like, oh my God, she's not that bad. Like, I really thought I was just like confessional, like, oh, I'm going to hell for this. And and I read over, I was like, this is not that bad. And I don't need to tell this many embarrassing stories. That's just clearly my shame talking, I can just pick one or two, and that pretty much sums it up. But I would say, yeah, tell the story first for you, as if no one's eyes are going to see it. And then you can think about people in your life and how you want them, how you want to be mindful of people that have been good to you, that you are kind to them in your memoir. But aside, as far as an audience, right, that's very different than thinking about loved ones. But then when you get into what does the audience think, every single time I feel myself pulled to do that, which it does happen a ton, the writing starts getting really shitty. Really shitty. And I'll catch it. As soon as I catch it and I reverse it, I look back and I'm like, yeah, that totally sabotaged what I was creating.
Wow.
Yeah.
I work with a lot, I'm friends with a lot of people that are writing memoirs, have written memoirs, and are either self-publishing or kind of going down a publishing journey. You chose to self-publish, but you also rejected every single traditional thing that people said you should do. If you're going to get this out, and you have been like, the more you stay true to yourself, the more you get everything that other people deem as successful, whether that is, like when I met you, you had like a small Instagram following. Now you're over 100,000 followers. You never show your face. They're all funny, really insightful memes around neurodiversity. And it is delightful. It is relatable. It is encouraging. It is very validating, I would imagine, for people. Like, I fall in a corner of the neurodiversity on the ADHD, but you work with a lot of people that have different levels of what that looks like. or their neurodiversity. Tell me about, because what I have discovered about you specifically is the more that you, like your pain of trying to be like people thought you should have been. And the more that your arc has been like the pain came from you trying to be somebody that you weren't, trying to fit in. And now it's gone to a point where it's like, there is no way I'm even swimming in those waters anymore. And it must feel very free to give up, not give up, but like to release the chains that I think we all struggle with of like fitting in or not. And I wonder your path to self-publishing. Tell me what that felt like for you when the world may be telling you, you need to get a publisher, you need to get a social media, you need to get a big following and handle all the pre-sales, and your title needs to be this and your artwork needs to be this. And you're like, I'm going inward and I'm going to do this my way. Tell me about your way.
Yeah,
That
well,
was a long lead up to the
sometimes
question.
no, and I mean, I like it's. I'm very grateful for all the positive ways that you frame the things that I do. But in some ways, and sometimes it feels just as badass as kind of how you're describing it or how it sounds like you're imagining it. Like it definitely feels that way sometimes, but it also feels terrible sometimes and isolating and like hard and difficult. So I think it's worth noting that you're seeing, an Instagram following grow, or you're seeing
You don't give a shit
a
about
book. I really can't. I think that's the distinction is
That's what's hilarious.
I
That people would
can't.
kill for a following like that, and you're like, I don't even look at it. I just post and ghost.
Yeah. And for me, the alternative is an extreme discomfort. And so I just can't care. And because caring for me is a very deep feeling, and it runs deep and it weighs heavy. So if I cared, I would be getting rejected like 20, I'd be checking the numbers all the time. It would just be a nightmare. So I can't do that. But, no, it's sometimes I love that I've always had to forge my own path. Sometimes I reflect on that and I go, what a badass little girl. Like, look at her. And sometimes forging your own path is like, your knees are getting scraped by the thistles and like you're really alone on that path and you're really forging it and you're not sure that you're doing it right and you're questioning yourself and you don't have anybody to look to be like, is this right? Is this okay? So I want to be clear about the cycle of that. And I think that's a perpetual evolution or like cycle that I'm in that I think is just part of being me. So yeah, there are badass aspects to it that I fully feel and fully agree with. There are also like very difficult aspects to working this way. So I'm just kind of here, like as far as when, if people like listen to guidance or advice, it's for people who have to work like that. Like if you have some other way of working and publishers are knocking at your door, then like go for it. And if you're okay with outsourcing because people can understand what's in your brain and you can articulate it really well, great. But if you work like me and you have a really difficult time articulating yourself to other people other than hours and hours and months spent writing it in a book, and you have to kind of go your own way because your brain kind of forces you to, then maybe some of the stuff that I'm saying would be helpful.
Well, I think we get tricked. We get tricked because if you open up social media, there's every guru, there's every expert out there, there's everyone who has their foolproof framework and that they have gotten bestseller lists. And there's a lot of, I call it like a lot of people are trying to put frosting on the cake before they actually bake it. They're like, let me just get the followers. Let me just get something going viral. Let me just get an audience so I can feel validated or feel like the podcast, the book, the speech, the whatever is going to be worthy enough. That is my story. And I know you've got a chapter in here about rejection sensitivity, which is typical of somebody with ADHD. Something that I deeply struggle with is rejection sensitivity. Help me understand what that looked like for you.
Yeah, I describe it in the book because my husband I had a very poorly thought out idea, and he reflected that the mechanical physics and the idea that I had wasn't possible. I was trying to build something
Was
based.
that for Bonnaroo?
Yeah.
That was a
I
really
was trying to
funny
build a
story.
really cool cloud,
That was so funny.
functioning cloud. And it was just a really whimsical idea that was only living in my head, and it had no mechanical physics or mechanical engineering
Right.
reliability attached to it. And he was showing me all of the ways that this idea was probably not going to work. But I feel that happens to be like 1,000 times a week. So the rejection, I describe it as like a needle just like stabbing you in the heart, and you're just flooded with hurt and sometimes rage, and managing that, like knowing that that's not a proportional reaction, but it feeling like everyone in the room just turned their backs on you all at the same time, and you don't know why. Yeah, that happens, and it happens at very inopportune times, and having to manage that is complicated. So I feel like sharing both sides of that story, because sometimes we want to go after the person we feel rejected us.
Yeah.
But he was really just speaking the truth. But I also don't want to attack myself. Like, I want to share what that feels like on the inside to experience that. But I think that's just the way to tell that story of rejection sensitivity is, this is what this feels like to me, but also there aren't really any villains in the room. It just sort of sucks.
Yeah. And I think it is moving away from the validation piece of like, if I put my story out there and nobody sees it. And there are a lot of people, when I was partnering with the personal brand strategy firm, and I was doing sales for them. And I would talk to people that are like, I can't, I wrote this book, and I picture them like toiling in their basement, just writing their heart out. And that book can be the most brilliant book in the world. And they throw it up on Amazon, and they sell 50, 60, 100 books, their friends, family, and then it just sits there. They have no audience. They have no idea. And it's downright depressing, because it feels like, just like you said, everybody turned their back on you at the same
That's
time.
how it feels, yeah.
And I wonder how you get over that risk and that fear of doing the thing, whether it's writing a book or launching a podcast, or that your idea may not, is my idea good enough? Is it, because I think we're always thinking about, how can I help? And how can I use my story in a way for service? But also knowing that there are no guarantees, and like managing the expectations around, what does success look like for you? And I'm curious, what does success look like for you when you release this book?
Oh, is the act of releasing it. You talked about Rick Rubin earlier, and I hold very near and dear the advice that he gives about, my job is to create. My job is to create something real and authentic and true and share it. And it's everyone else's job to respond to it. And I hold a very, very hard line at that. So I have so many pep talks with myself ahead of time that no matter what, we don't judge the quality or the pride that I have in myself or in what I created based off the response. So yeah, that I'm just have a very, very hard line that it's other people's job to respond to that. And the lack of response or a negative response or whatever it may be, that's them sharing something about themselves with you. That's not them sharing a reflection on your worth or what you've created's worth. It really is their sharing with you wounds that maybe your book is bringing up in them, or that's not their story or whatever it might be. But that's just not my job. So my pride and my success is in creating and holding myself to the standard of, I'm going to create something honest, something real, something thoughtful, something genuine that's like my voice. And here you go. I'll share it, because that is kind of part of art, is the act of sharing. But then that's it. I cut it off there. So that the success is that I really did create something that I know I put thought into. I know it's honest. I know I held myself to that standard.
What did you learn about yourself through this process that you were surprised about?
For Maladaptive
Yeah.
Daydreams, definitely I could write poetry. Um, what was really cool was I learned how to articulate a lot in a small form. And that was really fun. It was really fun to learn I was capable of that, that like decode writing in such a way that I could really figure out, oh, that's why that packs a punch. That's why that sentence sounds better than that sentence, or that's why that description is more profound than that one. So I think I grew as a writer. Personally, I would say, other than just like my writing style and creating, a lot of that happened behind the scenes of the book and before the book. But I certainly learned that I'm autistic and that it's real, and it's got its grip in me. But I will say I do kind of want to share, and this isn't totally related to your question, but it keeps coming up, so I'm like, maybe there's a reason to share it.
I honor that.
About feedback or about like
Yeah.
response. There's one response that this book got that mattered to me, and it really matters more than a publisher calling or a book deal or anything else. And it's that there's this coffee shop that I would go and write in, because it has art and coffee. And so I could go and look at art, be inspired, and it really helped me break down a lot of like writer's blocks. So when I finished the book, I gave it to one of the baristas behind the counter, and I was like, hey, like, you guys were a place I could come to when I was having writer's block. So I thought I would just share with you, here's what you guys helped create. And then I just left it alone. And like maybe a month went by, and I go in there once a week. And a month went by or maybe more. And I go in there, and the barista was like, you have become an urban legend here.
What?
And he said that everybody's been passing my book around. The staff have all passed my book around. They'll sit and read it for like an hour. They'll talk about like the stuff that's in it. And that he was like, you're like kind of famous around here. We all love your book.
How did that make you feel?
Oh, it was that was amazing. I cried, like not in front of him, like of course,
Of course not.
the autism. But I went off on my own and cried, and I was just I was like, that is really what art and creating is about. That was just like my wildest dream.
Yeah.
To have a bunch of baristas, because they're very critical. Like baristas, they're not going to tell you that your writing is good.
Right.
They all read. They're all avid readers. So it just made me like, oh wow, this is the real kind of validation that I'm looking for.
I wanted to read. Can I read one of the poems? Just like two of these. So this one is Sprout.
Sure. Oh yeah, I love Sprout.
I'm just going to read, and just to validate that you can say a lot in just a few words. I was born with a tiny seed in my hand, with a little note attached that read, "Plant me where you know I'll be safe." I decided to hold on to it instead. Like, I think the safety aspect of the sprout of us feeling like the seed, I'm not sure why I'm crying.
Yeah, it makes me a little emotional too.
Around me, I only saw twisted vines and tar ground, and decided that now was not the time. I would wait until I could walk further to a place where the soil was fine. And we find ourselves in these places again and again and again and again of like, later, I'm not ready. And so the poetry really is beautiful. I'm going to get myself together.
No, that's really meaningful though, that it moves you.
It is a very moving book, and what I understand is that this is a book to be savored, that people aren't like crushing this book. They're taking their time with it. What does that feel like to you?
Crazy cool. That's probably the most consistent feedback I get. People will tell me different poems resonate or whatever, but most consistent feedback is that they're making themselves put the book down because they don't want it to end. They know there won't be like another first time that they read it, which is crazy for somebody to describe something I wrote that way, particularly since that book in particular, because I had learned so much about creating at that point. It was a world for me. Like I really was like, I don't care if nobody knows what this means. I don't care if this is too specific. I don't care if this loses them. This is my world for me to go rest in when I need to. And so to have people show up in that world and be like, oh, I find this comforting too, or this is a safe place for me as well. The sensory aspect, like the fact that that came through, because for me it was all like the whole book was about immersing in my like a sensory experience. For me though, I don't know that that's how anybody's gonna feel that way too, but it's the way people have felt that and felt like it was a multi-sensory experience reading it. That's just been really, really, really cool.
I actually read the book on a plane ride up and a plane ride down, and read the whole book. And I wish I had more time to digest it. I am not used to reading poetry, and I'm also I don't know if I'm highbrow enough.
Oh, please. I have a beef with that, believe.
You do? Tell
I have
me.
a beef with highbrow poetry.
Tell me.
I think it's what made me think I couldn't write a poetry book.
Okay.
I have a big beef with kind of gatekeeping. I think I think I'm not alone with that.
All
yeah.
right.
Of making, like writing, like, did you feel like that poetry was inaccessible or like, oh, this is
No.
too fancy for me to
No.
understand?
No.
Exactly.
But I felt like there was almost like a wave. You know, you didn't know what to expect next, right? It wasn't a linear story, even though it was shared. Like you can see that there are arcs, but it was moving back and forth from storytelling to poetry. And so, you know, my brain understanding the stories better, where the poetry I would read again and again, you know, and I wish I had more time to like absorb it in a way and understand it, you know, and it was so beautifully written. Are you still writing poetry now?
Thanks. No, I'm gonna. My brain is mush. No writing is happening right now. I'm doing anything but writing, but I'm sure I will again because it was so cathartic, and it felt
Do
good.
you feel like an urge to write? Like there's a story emerging? Like I know you're life coaching and, you know, raising a son and, you know, doing all kinds of stuff, but what is post book release look like for you?
For me, immediate like how, and this might be a good point to kind of make about neurodivergent brains in general. For me, because my brain doesn't work in a linear way, I don't feel the peak joy upon completion of a goal. So, you know, linear brains, it's just sort of, they line up, oh, here's me, here's achievement, and they just keep working towards goals because that's when they feel the most fulfillment, the most joy. So they just keep setting goals. But how my brain works is it enjoys the process of creating, the process, being down in the wormholes and creating. So by the time I'm finished, and that should be, you know, the big celebratory thing, right? Oh, you published the book, you should have a party, you should celebrate in some kind of way. I'm so over it at that point. Like the completion is not the point for me. So usually there's some exhaustion after completion.
What does recovery look like for you?
Just doing anything else, you know, going out in the woods or painting or reading or just like literally anything but writing.
Yeah.
But I do think that I am a writer. I think I unlocked something when I allowed myself to write a book. And
Would
so
you
I
have
think
said
I'll be
that
writing.
before? Bright girl lacks focus.
No, definitely not. I would have always thought, like, theoretically I'd like to be one.
Yeah.
But having actually finished a book gave me the confidence to be like, I can do this. And now I not just can do it, but I just very much enjoy it. So
What
I'll
is
keep
feedback
writing.
that surprised you outside of the coffee shop, the baristas?
It's just, I think how much people can relate to things that feel so personal and specific. And I get writing advice from weird places, but actually, Bill Hader, who was on Saturday Night Live,
Yeah.
and Seth Rogen, who is a hilarious actor, they both taught me that the more specific you are, the more deeply things connect. And so you'll think, I'm going to lose them because this is too specific. But I've learned to really listen to that.
Huh.
And so I just think it still surprises me, though, how true that is, that you'll write something. And when, you know, many people come up to me and be like, I feel like we live the same lives.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what? How? You know, because it's such a weirdly specific life. And I kept so many of the stories in both books to myself for so long that because I thought they're too weird, they're too odd, they're not normal. So having people say, I felt like we lived the same life is
Wow.
bizarre to me, because I'm like, how is that possible? I kept all this a secret. Even my family members, like some of the stories from Bright Girl Lacks Focus, and maybe probably yeah. My husband was like, I didn't know that. Like people closest to me were like, I never knew that. And so I'm like, I held these so close to my chest that nobody knew them. So to have people then who I don't even know say, me too, it never falls short. How crazy that is.
Wow. And I have to say, sometimes I'll have people, just from a storytelling perspective, to kind of validate what you're saying, is sometimes people will come on my show and they are sharing their story, but the story is like they're so focused on wrapping it up in a bow that they skim through the specifics. They're like, I'm so glad this awful catastrophic thing happened because then it brought me where I am today. And I'm like, shh, no, go back. Like we need to be in the moment. And I think part of that is like memorying, like memorying. We're going to start
Remembering?
using that. Remembering. Memorying. It's a new word. Start using
Cool.
it. But I think there is something to be said about the specifics. And I've heard like the more specific, the more terrific. But I think there is something to be said about like stop trying to wrap it up in a bow and have the arc done. And I wonder if that feels the way. Like, did you write where you're like, I have no idea where this is going?
I really, really feel like you should leave it up to people to decide and what they want to take away. I think if you try to force, I know for myself personally, because I'm a big consumer of people's stories, because I'm so fascinated by humans, that the ones that I feel like they're trying to tell me what to think about them, or they're trying to tell me what to take away, their story, I don't want to hear it. It feels like I'm being controlled. The PDA kicks in, and I'm just like,
what is PDA?
Pathological demand avoidance.
What does that mean?
It means because you want me to do this, I suddenly do not want to do this anymore. It's a high demand for autonomy. And so when I feel like someone's trying to take away my autonomy and tell me what I should be taking away from their story, I don't like it. So for sure, that was very important to me, that I felt like Maladaptive Daydreams, there isn't even really a point, really. It really is a story of me going to a music festival. If we really, if we boil it down to what it is, Cindy goes to Bonnaroo. And so that is so mundane and so boring and so anticlimactic. But it's like that for a reason, because I love stories where I get to decide who my heroes are, like, is that person a villain or not? Or do I like this or not? I want to take this away from that, or I interpret that like this. So like leaving that room for interpretation for people to make it their own. I think that's why it's my story resonates with people, is because I am ordinary and I don't try to be not ordinary. And then you're also, like, it leaves so much room, I think, for you to be ordinary with me or be extraordinary with me, if that's how you see me.
I do see you as extraordinary, and I push back on the ordinary thing, but you can take that.
Ordinary isn't that bad.
I couldn't imagine you saying I'm special and extraordinary, but I see you that way, which is probably why you don't see me too often.
Oh, shut up.
Maybe that's why you stay away. But I wonder about the title Maladaptive Daydreams. Like, it does feel like a daydream. And I think the beauty of a daydream is like the sensory experience. It's a perfect title. Tell me about the maladaptive part. Why maladaptive?
Well, that's a symptom. So that's a clinical symptom that a lot of neurodivergent people experience, not exclusively, but maladaptive daydreams are daydreams that become so consuming that they disrupt your real life or your day-to-day life. So it's a real thing that people can struggle with. And I really wanted that to be the title, because the whole point is we can be very disabled and we can be very not having it together and very screwed up. And we're still really whimsical and beautiful, just like we are. And so to take, like, yeah, maybe you have the symptom of maladaptive daydreams, but like, it's okay. This over pathologizing and like over self-reflecting and self-correcting and seeing everything as something that needs to be fixed. I just wanted to push back on that and
so
name it
good.
that way in like a pretty way, like maladaptive daydreams. Okay, whatever.
That is so good. How do people get into touch with you or get the book?
Oh yeah, well, it's
Maladaptive
maladaptive
Daydreams.
daydreams. We
Right?
didn't
I feel
hammer
like
that
it's
hard
been a
enough.
big commercial for that in Bright Girl Lacks Focus.
Yes. Yeah, it's on, I mean, you can search it on Amazon. And then my website is cindyrobinsonllc.com, and that kind of connects people wherever they.
Well, your Instagram is also where it's at.
Yeah, that's Cindy Robinson LLC. So
Yeah.
you can go there and join the 100,000 people.
It is so funny and so delightful. And I'm so grateful to have you back on, Cindy. It's been a joy. And how fun is it to be on camera?
We really moved up in the world. This is such an
right?
upgrade.
But did you notice?
Yeah, this is cool. This is very cool.
Do you like it or does it feel weird?
No, I think this makes it more, I don't know, just like you're really doing a thing. I feel like I'm really doing something right now.
I've really been doing a thing for years.
Yes.
This is so great. So big shout out to Scotch Media for hosting us. This is a really beautiful studio. And big thank you to Cindy Robinson. Cindy, thank you so much for being back. You're welcome anytime. Any daydream you have or idea, come on back. We'll always have a good conversation about it.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience and for always being such an easy interview.